Hello everyone, and welcome back to another video on the Halo series. With this video, we're going to be talking about Halo 2. If you haven't seen my previous video on Halo Combat Evolved, there is a card in the corner for those who aren't up to date with regards to the story so far. Released back on November 9, 2004, Halo 2 was easily one of the most anticipated follow-ups to a video game at the time, with many eagerly waiting to get their hands on the next installment. Bungie's goal with the next entry to the franchise was to expand upon various elements within Halo Combat Evolved regards to the Covenant and other areas as well, in addition to also adding an online multiplayer component which wasn't present in Halo Combat Evolved, as originally you could only play with either split screen or a LAN play. While the multiplayer component saw high praise for introducing things such as matchmaking, lobbies, clan organization, and user emblems, all done with the help of Xbox Live, which was relatively new at the time, the campaign on the other hand was seen as a bit more divisive. We will go into a bit more detail when we begin talking about the campaign. Halo 2 sold 8 million copies worldwide, making it the best-selling Xbox game. Now with this video, we'll be covering the entirety of Halo 2 in depth, so if you don't want your first time experience with the game to be spoiled for you, you have been warned. For those who are continuing to stick around for the ride, let's go ahead and talk about the next entry in the series, Halo 2. The campaign begins by giving us a shot of the Covenant Holy City, High Charity. Within it, a trial is being held by three noble prophets, Truth, Regret, and Mercy, these individuals being at the helm for leading the Covenant. The trial in question is being held due to a Covenant elite commander unable to stop the first Halo ring's destruction. With many claiming that the elite was a traitor and one of the prophets really wanting to give it to him, they send the elite off to have him deranked and branded as a heretic. Elsewhere, on the Earth defense platform aptly named Cairo, we see the Master Chief getting his new suit of armor, that being a Mark 6 suit, which allows his shields to recharge a lot faster. After going through a brief tutorial segment, Johnson shows up to take the Chief and they both kinda peace out. Alright, so the game kind of shifts back and forth between the Covenant and the humans, so try to bear with me as we're going through this. On the Covenant side, we see much of the Covenant showing up for the Elite Commander's torture sequence, and the Brute Chieftain Tartars being at the helm of this torture. The Brutes are basically an ape-like species that have their behavior kind of defined as something being akin to warlike in nature. Let's just say that they were by and large defeated by the Covenant some time back and are now working with them. Anyways, back to the humans. We are showed Johnson, who is being honored for his efforts in the first Halo game by an individual named Lord Terrence Hood, who is the highest ranking flag officer of the UNSC Navy, the Chief of Naval Operations. Quickly being shifted back to the Covenant, we see the elite commander having his armor being stripped away. Transitioning back over to the human side of things, the daughter of Captain Keyes named Miranda Keyes is shown being honored for her father's actions and what he did to help contribute to the overall fight against the Covenant. Back over to the Covenant, the elite commander is shown being tortured even more so by Tartarus, branding a mark on his chest to really showcase his heresy towards the Covenant. Back over to the human side of things, Cortana knows that there are slip space ruptures showcasing a crapload of Covenant cruisers appearing. Lord Hood tells his men to form a defensive perimeter around the cluster and then proceeds to give Cortana access to the Mac gun, with Lord Hood having some suspicions. One of the other individuals in the room states that there are boarding craft moving in, with Lord Hood stating that the Covenant's objective is to take the Mac guns offline, with him tasking the Chief to defend the station. With the Chief taking out a plethora of Covenant that have made their way into Cairo, other various stations are shown being blown to bits and pieces, with Cortana mentioning that the Covenant have brought bombs to those stations, and that's what caused the other stations to go kablooey. Lord Hood, noting that they definitely brought a bomb to their station, tasked the Chief with finding the bomb immediately. With the Chief stopping the bomb just a mere seconds away from it exploding, Miranda mentions to Lord Hood that the carrier shield is down and that they are prepared for an immediate assault. Lord Hood states that with the ship being quite large, he declines the request, with the Chief butting in and requesting to leave the station. Lord Hood asks why, and Chief responds with wanting to give the Covenant back their bomb. With Lord Hood giving him the go-ahead, the Chief brings the bomb to an opening that he creates to leave and bring it directly to the carrier, and to create a massive explosion taking out the carrier entirely. He then shortly lands on Inember Clad, with Miranda telling him to get inside as they are going to take the fight to the surface. We transition to a city on Earth titled New Mombasa, where Cortana states that the Covenant keep mentioning a name Regret, and that he is calling for help. Lord Hood relays to the Chief that the objective now is to get aboard the carrier in which Regret is located, and to scare him to question him as to why he landed on this specific part of Earth. Shortly after this, a big spider-looking piece of machinery called a Scarab appears taking out their ship and having them crash land in the city. The Scarab is pretty much an ultra-heavy artillery assault platform capable of doing some serious destruction to just about anything in its path. After battling their way through part of the city, the Chief meets up with a small group of Marines that attempted to take out the Scarab with rockets and tanks, which didn't do much of anything to it at all. Johnson shows up shortly after asking where the rest of their platoon is, with one of the Marines stating that they were basically wasted. Another Marine states that they will be too if they don't get the hell out of there. Johnson snaps him out of his fear with one of his awesome speeches and tasks the chief and them to get to where the scarab is located and to take it out. After taking helm of the Scorpion tank and making their way to where the scarab is, the chief sees it in action completely decimate another Scorpion tank right in front of him. After this happens, the chief gets into a higher position to where he can get the drop on the scarab and proceeds to take out the Covenant commanding the beast. The chief is shown coming out of the scarab with it in destruction. Miranda shortly after instructs Johnson to extract the chief and to bring him on in Amber clad. With the chief on board, Miranda asks Lord Hood to engage the Prophet, with him declining the request. The carrier is seen making a slip space rupture, making a jump inside the city. Miranda once more requests Lord Hood to engage, with Lord Hood giving the green light to do so. An Amber clad chases right after the carrier, with one of the pilots stating that they don't have a confirmed destination, with Miranda stating that she doesn't want to lose that ship. They were able to make it to the carrier and go right along with it, with a blast shortly following afterwards, destroying pretty much all of New Mombasa. After this, we then transition to the Covenant, with the Brutes carrying the elite off to the Prophets, as they have something special in mind for him. They bring him to where the Prophets are located, with Truth telling Tartarus to leave him and to take his Brutes with him. After they leave, Truth tells the elite that the Council have made the decision to have the elite hung by his entrails and his corpse paraded through the city. However, he states that in terms of his execution, they are up to Truth. He asks the elite where they are, with the elite replying that they are in a place called the Mausoleum of the Arbiter. Arbiters were responsible for such things as the taming of the Hunters, the Grunt Rebellion, as without the Covenant, they would have fallen apart long ago. The elite states that he doesn't belong in their presence, with Truth stating that while yes, the destruction of Halo was his doing, he sees the actions decided by the Council to be a bit over the top and doesn't see the elite as a heretic. Truth then shows the elite what a true heretic is and displays an elite who appears to be talking with a large group and is relaying to those listening that the prophets are false and to open their eyes, as they intend to bring ruin and destruction, and the message is shortly ended by Truth. He then asks the elite to silence him and to those who follow him. The elite mentions that he is basically useless and he is no longer able to command ships and lead those into battle. Truth goes on to mention that as of right now he is unable to do so, but by becoming the Arbiter, he will then be able to be set loose against the heresy. Mercy mentions how those who become the Arbiter basically undergo missions that are deemed suicidal, and that he will basically die as each other Arbiter has before him. The Arbiter takes the armor that is presented to him and turns to the Prophets and asks them what they would like him to do. We transition to a scene where the Arbiter is with the other Covenant and he overhears the Shipmaster's oath and how all those on board recite various parts within that oath. Shipmaster approaches the Arbiter, stating how the armor he has on suits him, but it cannot hide the mark he now bears, mentioning how he is now the Arbiter, the will of the Prophets, and that despite this, the elites that are on board matter to him far more than the Arbiters, with the Arbiter acknowledging how he doesn't view his life as worth much either. The Phantoms land in an area where the heretic leader was last sighted, and they make their way to where he is located. After fighting your way through the facility, they meet up with the heretic leader for a brief moment before he sends his men after you and then proceeds to take off. After dealing with his followers, the Arbiter takes off after him with the aid of a Phantom in a pretty awesome sequence. After flying around and dealing with some of the heretic followers, the Arbiter lands in an area where the heretic leader last landed and chases after him. Shipmaster is with the Arbiter at this point and makes a comment about a particular stench and how he has smelled it before. What he is referring to is the Flood, as they are also located here as well. After making their way through the facility, a hologram of the heretic leader appears and notes how the Prophets have sent an Arbiter to kill him and that he is flattered by it. After this exchange, the group gets ambushed by Flood infection forms, and after dealing with them for a brief moment, a door opens up and they progress further into the facility. After going through some rather uninteresting holdout sequences, they catch up to the heretic leader, where he ends up locking himself off from the others, with Shipmaster finding himself frustrated by this action. He isn't sure what to do next, with the Arbiter following up with wanting to force the heretic leader out by cutting the cable that is keeping the station held up. The Shipmaster allows for this and gathers his men out of the area while the Arbiter heads up to where the cable is located. After cutting the cable, the station enters into a freefall state where the Arbiter then makes his way to the heretic leader, but he makes off again in a Banshee, with the Arbiter giving chase after him and fighting his way through heretics, Flood, and the Sentinels. After dealing with all of this, he finally gets to where the heretic leader is located and confronts him, with the heretic leader stating how he would rather die by the Arbiter's hands than by the Prophets. The Arbiter demands him to state who has taught him these lies about the Prophet's great journey. 343 Guilty Spark then enters the scene and introduces himself to the Arbiter, with the heretic leader suggesting to the Arbiter to ask him about Halo and how the Prophets would sacrifice them all for nothing. Even though 343 Guilty Spark is joyed at the idea of informing the Arbiter about this, the heretic leader then pulls out 2 plasma rifles and begins to fire at the Arbiter, with the Arbiter taking cover from the gunfire. The heretic leader states how the elites are blind and that he will help them open their their eyes to see the truth of things. After having a brief boss battle with the heretic leader, he is killed, with 343 Guilty Spark stating how it's unfortunate as his teachings were most enjoyable. The Arbiter states how the heretic leader had imperiled the Great Journey, with 343 Guilty Spark questioning why they would use such terms as Oracle and Great Journey, as they were inaccurate terms being used. However, Tartarus uses his hammer to pull in 343 Guilty Spark before any kind of questions can be made, with both the Arbiter and Tartarus at this point leaving the facility and proceeding to head back to High Charity. Transitioning to the human's perspective, we see an Everclad appearing out of the jump from New Mombasa, with Miranda asking her men to find out where they are, with the Chief and Johnson appearing to be fine. One of the pilots states that an object is coming into view, with Miranda asking Cortana what it is, with Cortana stating that it's another Halo, with Miranda then following up asking Cortana about Halo and what it is, with her stating that it is some sort of super weapon and it is able to cause destruction on a galactic scale. Miranda requests for all available information that they have on the first Halo ring and issues the order to the Chief to find the Prophet of Regret. The objective now is to secure the Prophet of Regret and to find out why he came to Earth and why he is currently here. The Chief, along with a few other ODST members, make a drop onto the ring and begin their assault to find the Prophet of Regret. After fighting their way through various sections of the area, with at one point getting a scorpion dropped off to help aid the Chief, they proceed to where a speech is being made through a Covenant communicator. Look, that's what I'm going to call it, and we're moving right along. With Cortana asking the Chief to stop for a moment, and that she states that the Prophet of Regret wants to activate the Halo ring. The Chief questions Cortana's statements, with Cortana translating Regret's speech and basically confirming what she said. Chief states to Miranda that they have a problem, with Miranda overhearing the conversation and stating that the Prophet will need an index in order to activate the ring, and that the index itself is located in a place called the library, similar to what was found on the first Halo ring. Miranda states that she will take Johnson and some other Marines and head for the library, with the Chief continuing to make his way to where Regret is located and to take him out. After battling through numerous amounts of Covenant and checking out some really cool underwater ruins, as well as overhearing how Regret has done some questionable acts, at least from Truth's perspective, the Chief comes across a Covenant communicator with how the Prophet of Regret talks about the Great Journey and how no Covenant will be left behind, with Cortana questioning if the Covenant really know anything about what the ring's true purpose is. Chief makes his way to the main temple, with Miranda stating that she is coming close to the library. The Chief makes his way inside the main temple, with a large Covenant fleet appearing right above them. He quickly gets to where Regret is and confronts him and takes him out by giving a good old punch to the face several times. After doing this, one of the Covenant cruisers begins to glass the entire temple to take out the Chief, but he jumps off into the water, where an unidentified being pulls him further down into the water. Jumping back to the Covenant side of things, we see the Arbiter back at High Charity and making his way to the Prophets, and while heading there he notices the exchange of hats, with the elites going from the Prophets' main protectors to now the Brutes. Shipmaster confronts the Prophet, stating that this occurrence is unacceptable, with Truth stating that one of the hierarchs is dead because of their actions, with Shipmaster stating that if Truth had not withdrawn his phantoms, he would have been able to take out the Prophet's murderer. Truth then asks Shipmaster if he is questioning his decision making, with Shipmaster stating that he isn't and that he is concerned with the Brutes taking over. Truth mentions how this change was indeed a radical step, but because of Regret's death, it showcases that the elites are unfit to protect the Prophets. With Shipmaster accepting this decision and going to tell the Council the news, he passes the Arbiter on his way out, with the Arbiter approaching the Prophets. Truth tells the Arbiter how the elites have threatened to resign because of the actions taking place, with the Arbiter stating that the elites have always been their protectors, with Truth following up with how the times are hard all around. First, he chimes in on how the loss of one of the sacred rings has filled everyone's hearts with grief, with Truth mentioning that despite this, they renewed their faith in the prophecy in hopes that other Halo rings may be found, and with this happening, they were rewarded as there is another Halo ring with which Mercy states how those who are worthy will be propelled to the path of salvation. Truth states how the Oracle, 343 Guilty Spark, that they found thanks to the aid of the Arbiter was helpful to them, as they asked it numerous questions about the ring and how to activate it. What they found is that they will need to find a key, and with it they will be able to fulfill their promise, which is salvation for all, as well as being able to start the Great Journey. The Arbiter is then tasked with finding the icon, which Tartarus and the Brutes assist him by bringing the Arbiter in as close to the library as possible. With the Arbiter dealing with countless amounts of Sentinels and then the Flood shortly in, the Arbiter continues onwards, and relatively soon he meets up with the other elites who will now aid him on his quest to find the icon. He soon meets up with the Shipmaster, and they hold out against the onslaught of Flood that swarmed them. After this encounter, the Arbiter speaks with the Shipmaster briefly on how the icon is nearby and that he must find it, with the Shipmaster stating that they will kill any and all Flood that stand in their way to aid the Arbiter. They are given vehicles with which they can head further into the area to find the icon. After some traversing, they find a contraption that ends up bringing them closer to the library. However, they also notice that the humans are also a little further ahead of them, and with the same goal in mind. After dealing with more onslaughts of Flood, the Arbiter makes his way into the library, where Miranda Keyes is seen attempting to take the icon from where it is. She succeeds in retrieving the icon with the help of Johnson. After they retrieve the icon, Johnson then asks his men how their exit is looking. With no response, Johnson assumes that there is trouble afoot and begins to scope out the area, with the Arbiter getting the drop on him, knocking off his weapon and throwing him to the wayside. Miranda begins to take fire at the Arbiter, with the Arbiter retreating to cover, with Miranda shortly after crying out to Johnson if he is alright. Getting no response and taking her eyes away for a moment, the Arbiter gets the jump on Miranda and whacks her with her own gun, knocking her to the ground. Shortly after this, Tartarus makes a sudden appearance, pulling the unconscious Miranda keys in and taking the icon that was on her. Tartarus congratulates the Arbiter, however the Arbiter states that the icon is his responsibility and not Tartarus's, with Tartarus stating that it was his responsibility at first, but now it is his responsibility. Tartarus then states that a bloody fate awaits him and the rest of his race, with the Arbiter following up with when the prophets learn of this, they will kill Tartarus for his actions. Tartarus chuckles at this and then he states that he was ordered by the prophets to do this. He then blasts the Arbiter into a dark pit where his fate is left up in the air. Shortly after this, we see the Master Chief being pulled into some kind of big area with something appearing before them, having Cortana stating, "What is that?" The creature in front of them is known as a Gravemind, a sentient being that is complete control of the Flood and issues them commands for them to execute on demand. It is also fairly knowledgeable, as it contains all thoughts and prior knowledge from the mass of bodies that has been thrown together to form this creature. Remember Captain Keyes from the previous game and what had become of him? The Flood were trying to create what you see before you now, the Gravemind back in the first Halo game, and this is pretty much the end result. You gotta remember, the Flood wanted to continue to expand and become fairly large within the galaxy, taking everything one by one. So anyways, back to this abomination on screen, the Gravemind comments on the Chief's appearance and overall cognition, with the Arbiter appearing shortly after and also commenting on the Arbiter's appearance and overall cognition. The Gravemind wishes to have a talk, and both the Prophet of Regret and the Monitor of Installation 05 appears before them, with the Prophet of Regret now appearing to be one with the Flood. The Gravemind comments on how the Monitor's containment protocol and the Prophet of Regret's great journey are basically the same, with the creature following up with how the prophets had promised the Arbiter's freedom from a doomed existence. However, he will find no salvation on the ring. The creature informs the Arbiter that the beings who built this place knew what they were doing and to not mistake their intent or everything will perish. The Master Chief reaffirms with what the Gravemind has stated, as Halo is very much a weapon that can basically nuke the universe, and with the prophets wanting to activate the ring would be a pretty huge mistake. The Arbiter commenting on how the Chief's ignorance already destroyed one of the rings and he will not destroy another. The Gravemind begins to state that he will show them the truth and task both the Chief and the Arbiter to search areas that will likely lead them to be able to stop the activation of the ring. They are then both teleported, yeah no I don't get it either, to do different locations. We cut back to High Charity where the prophets broadcast that they have found the sacred icon and that with it they are able to begin their great journey. Shortly after saying this, the Chief appears just before them, spooking one of the grunts and taking hold of his needler that he threw out of his hands due to his shock. Truth states to everyone in the room to kill the demon, but the Chief takes out everyone within the room, so whoops. After fighting his way through High Charity and saving some Marines that have been locked up, the Chief comes to a point where Amberclad makes a jump into High Charity, with the Chief taking notice. Cortana checks to see if there are any life signs on the ship itself, with her stating that there are no life signs detected. Progressing forward and coming across a pretty awesome moment where the Brutes and the Elites are fighting one another, the Chief swiftly deals with the two groups after their brawl has ended and proceeds forward with Cortana reporting that there have been sightings of Flood making their way into the city, and telling the Chief to hurry up with finding the index before things get to the point where it's really ugly. We cut to a scene where we see Miranda and Johnson are taken captive and are split between two phantoms, with Tartarus taking the index, with him being tasked to go and activate the ring. However, as soon as he takes the index, the Flood begin to attack the Covenant, and one of the infection forms attacks Mercy, with Tartarus making an attempt to take off the parasite, but Truth states to leave Mercy behind as the great journey waits for no one, which, damn, that's kinda fucked up. We then transition to where the Arbiter was teleported, with him making his way to where the index is, as well as getting some sweet revenge on the Brutes, taking them out stealthily and joining up with the other elites to help fight back against the Brutes. After doing a fair amount of killing, the Arbiter meets up with the shipmaster and tells him that the prophets were murdered by the Brutes. We see that one of the Phantoms drops off Tartarus and Miranda keys, and they proceed to head inside the facility to activate the ring. We then cut right back to the Master Chief, where he is too late to catch up to the Phantoms as they head out. The Chief proceeds to approach Mercy with a question asking where Truth is heading, with Mercy saying that they are heading to Earth to finish what they have started. Cortana states that the structure in the distance is a Forerunner ship, with Truth heading straight for it, and that if he leads the Covenant fleet to Earth, then they won't stand a chance, and that the Chief has to stop him. The Chief states that the Brute Tartarus has the index, and Miranda and Johnson, giving him the ability to activate the ring, with Cortana stating that if he does, then she will detonate in Amberclad's reactor just like how before she detonated the Autumn's before.
with the blast being able to destroy the city and the ring as well. The chief attempts to take Cortana with him, but Cortana says no as she doesn't want to chance a remote detonation, and that she will need to stay there. Shortly after this, a pelican appears carrying more flood and crash lands nearby, with the chief making his way to where the Forerunner ship is while fighting against the flood and the Covenant, with Cortana holding the launch sequence to give Chief enough time to make it to the ship. The chief makes it to where it is and is launched into the Forerunner ship with him making it aboard. Cortana wishes him good luck, and the chief's reply back was that when he is done with truth. However, Cortana cuts Chief off by stating that you shouldn't make a girl a promise if you know you can't keep it. Cutting back to the Arbiter, he asks what the structure in the distance is, with the shipmaster stating that it is where they will start the Great Journey. Gravemind's words echo in the Arbiter's mind, and that there is still time to stop the ring from being activated. The Arbiter requests the aid of the shipmaster to get him inside, with the shipmaster complying with his request. Shipmaster leads the Arbiter to where a scarab is located and states that they will use it to make their way to where Tartarus is. After battling their way to it, they ambush a hostage situation where Johnson is amongst those being held hostage. With him breaking free thanks to the Arbiter's sudden appearance, he makes his way into the scarab, with Johnson stating that while they don't really like each other, they have to do something to stop the activation of the ring. The Arbiter states how Tartarus locked himself inside the control room, with Johnson saying that he will basically blow up the doors to the control room if the Arbiter covers him with a Banshee, which he does so with no resistance. After Johnson blows open the doors with the Scarab's beam, the Arbiter makes his way inside, dealing with the brute resistance, and catches up to where Tartarus and Miranda keys are located. The Arbiter tells the Chieftain to stop and to put down the icon, with the Chieftain being shocked that the Arbiter is still alive. The Chieftain states that if he were to put it down, then he would be disobeying the Hierarchs, with the Arbiter following up with there are things about Halo that even the Hierarchs do not understand. The Chieftain comments on how what the Arbiter said is heresy, with the Arbiter asking if it is, and then consulting the Oracle about Halo's true purpose. The Oracle attempts to explain Halo's purpose, with the Chieftain halting his explanation and to telling him to not speak another word. Johnson appears shortly after, telling the Chieftain to stop shaking the light bulb, with the other brutes readying to attack Johnson, with Johnson saying that they want to keep their brains inside their head, and they better chill the hell out. The Arbiter then asks the question again to the Oracle, with the Oracle stating that they are weapons built by the Forerunners to eliminate any potential flood hosts, which would then render the parasite harmless. The Arbiter then asks about those who built the rings as to what happened to them, with the Oracle stating that after they had tried every option at their disposal, they activated the rings, and they, along with any other sentient life in the galaxy, died as planned. The Arbiter comments on how the Prophets have betrayed him, with the Chieftain being quite frustrated at this point, with him forcing Miranda Keyes' hand to activating the Halo ring, and what occurs here is a boss fight against Tartarus, and after they take him out, Miranda will be able to snatch the index away to stop the activation of the ring. Once Tartarus is taken down and the index is removed, the ring proceeds to fire, but the explosion is too weak to even destroy the ring itself. What follows suit here is that the Oracle states that the beacon is being set off to allow the other Halo rings to be remotely activated, with Miranda asking where someone would go to activate the other Halo rings, with the Oracle stating that it is a place called the Ark. After this discovery, we cut to where the Chief is, where he is still on the Forerunner ship, with one of the UNSC mentioning how there is an unidentified ship in the vicinity, with Lord Hood stating that it isn't one of theirs and to take it out. Master Chief then states that he is on the ship, with Lord Hood asking what he is planning to do, with the Chief responding to finishing this fight. Now, if you wait just long enough, we actually get a cutscene showing High Charity basically being overrun by the Flood at this point, with the Gravemind approaching Cortana and wanting to ask questions about various things, with Cortana complying to its response, with the screen fading to black, finally concluding Halo 2. So yeah, that's Halo 2's campaign, and well, given how it ended, you can probably see why people found its ending either good or bad. I will say that while I may not recall my first reaction to the ending all the way back when I first played Halo 2, I can say that in a way it's kind of a badass ending. Though with that being said, it definitely sticks out like a sore thumb when you hear those talk about how the game wasn't complete, and while it definitely shows, that's for sure. Bungie at the time really wanted to be ambitious with the sequel to Halo Combat Evolved, but soon realized that the vision that they had with the game couldn't be achieved as they weren't able to achieve it due to limited space with regards to the hardware and they were working with at the time. To give you an idea, they really wanted to have more sections of you fighting on Earth, but well, we didn't see all too many levels taking place back on Earth. If it makes you feel any better, one of the later installments for the Halo franchise takes place entirely on Earth, so it's not like they're completely threw the idea out the window at the very least. This in a way is kind of similar to that of The Legend of Zelda Wind Waker, where you could certainly tell that in the game that they were running out of time and parts of the game were cut due to time constraints. With Halo 2 in particular, they found themselves in a position where the game really couldn't be pushed back as so many people were hyped for the next entry that they didn't want to wait any longer for the game and that it had to come out on the date in which it was set to release. Despite the cliffhanger ending, I found it to be pretty exciting as we knew that we'd be getting a follow-up to the next entry to address some of the more unanswered aspects found within the game. Like, it basically ends with them needing to find a place called the Ark, and what is the Ark? Well, you'll just have to wait till my Halo 3 video comes out. But hey, besides the ending, what about the rest of the game? I actually found myself really enjoying the campaign thoroughly, as I feel Bungie did a really good job expanding upon the Covenant and the overall universe of Halo. I really enjoyed the direction what they took to characterizing the Covenant with regards to making them heavily religious and giving them an interesting perspective with regards to what the Halo means to them. I mean, yeah, we kinda got hints of them being heavily religious back in Halo Combat Evolved with how they described the first Halo ring with it being a religious symbol, but Bungie here fully embraces this more so with the Covenant having holy prophets and worshipping gods and such that I can personally dig it. And well, we actually got to see their perspective on things as it wasn't solely on just the humans for the entire game. Also, yes, the Covenant also speak English, and if you were to ask me, they kind of already spoke a little bit of English back in the first Halo game, at least with the grunts anyways, so to hear them speak English in Halo 2 doesn't really bother me as much as it might for some others out there. I mean, yeah, they could have made up a language to be sure that the Covenant were very much their own group, but hey, I don't mind them going with the route to having them speak English. I also really love the dialogue in this game, as I feel like every cutscene that played out, I had my eyes glued to my monitor because every scene felt like something important was happening, which 9 times out of 10, there definitely was for sure, and most of them I would be at the edge of my seat waiting to see what happened next. Also, when talking about the inclusion of the Arbiter, apparently back then there were people who didn't like the fact that they played on the Covenant side of things, with you controlling the Arbiter, but honestly, I loved pretty much every moment spent with him. He was a badass in his own way, and having him go through the motions of once being devoted to the Prophet's great journey, to being betrayed by those who he looked up to getting to his revenge on the brute chieftain Tartarus, it was an all-around awesome character arc and is one of my personal favorite characters in the Halo universe. Now I know that I mentioned that Johnson had a lot of funny one-liners back in my Halo Combat Evolved video, and I feel as though I should address this here and right now. He wasn't all that much of a witty character in the first Halo game, as with this entry, this is where they really made him an all-around badass, and one who I found myself enjoying every moment of screen time we got to see with Johnson. Lord Hood and Miranda Keyes are both characters that I found were pretty solid characters all around, as their presence in any scenario was not distracting or obnoxious in any way. And of course, Master Chief and Cortana are still really awesome characters, with this title in particular highlighting their relationship a bit more here. It's in small steps, sure, but it's something that I think was done really well without it coming out of nowhere. Overall, the campaign was really fun to sit through from start to finish, fleshing out more of the Covenant, and bringing in a new main character that easily stands with the Master Chief as just all-around badasses in the Halo universe, with much more of the focus on the story, and I personally think it's for the better in the end. There have been a few instances that weren't explained all that well, like the Grey Mine and the Ark, but I think the overall story carries the experience really well from start to finish. So let's move on to Halo 2's gameplay, and we've got quite a few things to talk about when it comes to the gameplay. First off, the Assault Rifle, one of the most iconic weapons in Halo CE, has been removed for this entry. While this did make me kind of have the big sad, not gonna lie, it was made up by the fact that Halo 2 would be the first to introduce dual wielding, where we can now take 2 weapons in each hand and feel like a true gamer. Dual wielding opens up the door for a lot of experimentation, as you can dual wield, let's say, a plasma pistol and a magnum, dual plasma rifles, or hell, dual wielding needlers, which is one of the strongest combinations used when playing through the campaign. Dual wielding, needless to say, is a welcome addition to the gameplay and really opens up a lot of possibilities to the player to further play around with the sandbox of weapons and to try out many different combinations. We also have the removal of your health bar, which I don't get why they did this, as the health bar was a way to allow you to make a few screw-ups in combat, and what's worse, at least from my perspective, is that your shield gauge looks punier as all hell, giving you not much in terms of defense from a visual perspective, especially when playing at higher difficulties, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But first, how about we address all of the new weapons that were introduced into Halo 2. Starting us off, we have the submachine gun, and this weapon can be dual wielded in each hand, and it can be pretty fun to run into hordes of grunts or other weaker enemies such as the Flood, and just sort of unload into them, putting out a ton of bullets in a matter of seconds. Overall, a fun addition with a recommendation to dual wield another one, or a plasma rifle, just to go to town with. Next we have the battle rifle, which is a 3-round burst rifle, and this is easily going to be a go-to weapon for Halo 2, as just by aiming at the head of pretty much most if not all enemies you encounter, you will be able to take them out with just one burst fire, and needless to say, you're going to be carrying this thing around with you whenever you get the chance to. Then we have the Brute Plasma Rifle, which at first you would believe to be just a simple reskin of the existing Plasma Rifle. However, the difference between the two is that the Brute Plasma Rifle has a much faster fire rate, but it overheats much quicker than the standard Plasma Rifle, which has a slower fire rate but doesn't overheat quickly. Not a bad addition, all things said and done. Next we have the Covenant Carbine, which is the Covenant's answer to the battle rifle, with the difference being that it isn't a 3-round burst weapon, as it fires one shot at a time. And much like with the battle rifle, this will be a weapon you will be having with you most if not all the time on higher difficulties. Again, we will address this relatively soon, but for now you just gotta stick with me here. a strong weapon capable of taking down just about almost anything with a well-placed headshot as long as the enemy isn't shielded first or wearing a helmet, much like with the battle rifle. Next up is the Brute Shot, which is a grenade launcher that is capable of doing some pretty solid damage. Do note that the damage done by this weapon is splash damage, so good use of this would be with groups of enemies as you're able to hit most if not all of them with this weapon. Its melee attack also does added damage thanks to it having a blade attached to the weapon, which is not only great for groups of enemies, but is also great for taking them out even when up close thanks to its massive blade and overall damage output. Next we have the Beam Rifle, which is the Covenant's answer to the human Sniper Rifle. However, unlike the Sniper Rifle, the Beam Rifle has a set amount of ammo that cannot be refilled, but when fired too much it will overheat, which can put you at a fairly big disadvantage. Control your shots when using this weapon and you will see some good results with it. Next up we have the Sentinel Beam, which is the laser that the Sentinel uses to shoot at you with. This is actually a pretty solid weapon at draining shields, and if you can keep firing with it against an enemy, you might be able to kill them outright with it. Not a bad weapon by any means, and is a great weapon to use against the Flood. Finally, the last new addition to the sandbox of weapons is the Energy Sword, which is a very strong melee weapon. Unlike most melee weapons from other FPS games, the Energy Sword is capable at lunging at enemies from afar, being able to take them out from a pretty big distance. Obviously, it has its own type of energy that depletes with each kill made with it, but it can also be drained by destroying dead Flood bodies with it, so be mindful about that. And wow, I'm kind of surprised at all of the new additions that were made with Halo 2 with regards to the weapons, because at first I only thought there were a few weapons added, but I am shocked at how much Bungie added in on top of this, with most of the weapons functioning differently from one another to have their own place in the sandbox. Now, as I said earlier, basically all of the weapons except the Assault Rifle were brought back, but we have to talk about some of the other changes made to the old arsenal, and how some of those changes are not for the better. First up is the shotgun, in which for those who watched my Halo CE video, I basically gushed about how the shotgun was basically an incredible weapon to be used at short to medium range. However, with Halo 2's shotgun, it's, well, not that great. For whatever reason, they dropped the range on it hard, basically making it where you need to fire it almost point blank at the enemy to get a one-shot off with it, and when it comes to playing on higher difficulties, it's basically a weapon you avoid across the board, sadly. Even against the Flood, while there may be a few instances where you can make it work depending on where you use it, you'll probably die way too fast for it to even make a dent against the enemy. The poor shotgun, what did they do to you? The next weapon to get a change up is the Magnum, and I'm conflicted on this one. On one hand, the Magnum has lost a large amount of its stopping power and its scope, making it very much a short-range weapon all around, and nowhere close to its status that it was held in Halo CE. However, the Magnum can be dual-wielded, and with the Plasma Pistol, it can be seen as a fairly solid combo since the Magnum is considered a headshot weapon. Firing off a charged Plasma Pistol shot and then following up with a Magnum round to the head against an enemy like an Elite will do you wonders. It has its uses, but please do not find yourself using it just one-handed. Try finding something that will complement it in any way. And next up, we have the newly added vehicles, to which we have a few here. The first up is the Wraith, in which, yes, is now finally drivable in Halo 2. Kinda surprised a little bit that it wasn't in the first place in Halo CE, but hey, no biggie. Then we have the Spectre, which is a Covenant ground vehicle that can move groups of Covenant around. While it can have a fair amount of individuals on it, the passengers are going to be fairly exposed, so do be careful on taking those spots on the vehicle itself. The turret on this baby, though, is pretty strong and can dish out some pretty hefty damage, so it's got quite a bit up its sleeve. Oh yeah, it can also boost to allow for splattering to happen quite easily. But nothing compares to the Gauss Warhog. This vehicle, much like the Warhog itself, has the same type of seating arrangement. However, the turret on this thing is quite disgusting if I do say so myself, being able to take out an enemy in roughly one hit, depending on the enemy type of course, to even destroying any land or air vehicle in seconds. Seriously, this thing can net you a serious amount of kills, so when someone is coming after you and they have a Warhog with a Gauss turret, you might as well say your prayers right then and there. Alright, so this next section is going to kind of lead us into the next part of the video, where we'll talk about the level design, but right now, let's talk about the difficulty for Halo 2. Now, I didn't bring up difficulty back in my Halo CE video, and if I'll be honest with you, I kind of forgot to do so, but hey, I'll say this right now, the legendary difficulty for Halo CE, I found to be pretty fair, as there weren't too many instances of bullshit that could really throw you in for a loop. A lot of Halo CE seemed fair, and as long as you knew what you were doing, then you would be fine across the board. With Halo 2, however, this game is just straight up almost unbearable when played at Legendary, and yes, I did do a full Legendary playthrough by myself, and needless to say, it wasn't all that much fun if I'm going to be honest, as this can be attributed to a number of things that I'm going to touch on, in case you feel like wanting to put yourself to basically the equivalent of torture. One of those is, yes, of course, the Jackal Snipers. Now, on heroic difficulty, these guys take about 2 shots to kill you. One if your shields are partially drained. On Legendary, however, it can take only 1 shot regardless of where your shields are at, and Jackal Snipers are littered on almost every level of the game, which makes it just unbearable, and basically boils down to memorizing where their location is and taking them out as swiftly as possible. The levels which are the worst to deal with them are, in my opinion, Outskirts, Metropolis, and somewhat Uprising. These guys are generally out of the player's vision most of the time, and especially with the level Metropolis, they can spawn multiple amounts of these bastards and really make you lose your patience pretty quickly. But as I said, this is just one of the many ordeals that you will be putting up with. The time it takes to kill you is also much quicker, and this contributes to the fact that the enemies fire much faster on Legendary. To put this into perspective as to how easily you can die on this difficulty, simply one burst from a plasma rifle will kill you outright, that being 4 shots to drop your shields and 3 to simply kill you. Yeah, that's the level of fucked up you're dealing with here. You're also dealing with much stronger enemies than before, as well as dealing with an increase to the number of enemies to fight through. Sometimes I personally didn't know, at least from my experience, but hey, I guess it's just my brain blocking out the trauma in any capacity. But there is an actual increase in the amount of flood combat forms that run around with shotguns and rocket launchers. Oh boy. The combat forms with shotguns can one-shot you from mid-range, which is absolutely fucked up. And that's not all of them, but if you're curious about any of the difficulty changes made when you play Halo 2 on Legendary, check out Halopedia's website for more info about the hell you go through on Legendary. It's honestly just a huge wall of text and it's all terrifying to read through. Easily one of the hardest levels in the game, if you were to ask me, is the level titled Gravemind, where quite literally as soon as you spawn in, you're under fire immediately and you need to find cover fast, for which some it will be too late, and the starting room you're in, you have to hold out against several groups of enemies before you can continue forward. Some of the enemy encounters in this level are no slouch either, so needless to say, you're in for a rough ride until the very end. I don't personally recommend playing through on Legendary unless you feel like you got something to prove, or you just flat out hate yourself. I don't know. Alright, I think I covered just about as much as I could with regards to the gameplay, so why don't we move on to the level design. So the level design of Halo 2 was quite linear. Rather than having some fairly open up spaces like in Halo CE that can allow for many different approaches to the combat, Halo 2 has a lot more corridors, which permeates throughout most of the time that you will be playing through the campaign. There are a few sections in certain levels that opens up a fair bit, but if you were to ask me, it's not as big as it was back in Halo CE. Though don't take this talk of corridors the wrong way, as by doing this approach, you get a lot more action going on, and it can be pretty intense. I will say that when it comes to playing on Legendary, I somewhat may not agree with the whole idea of constructing tighter areas to fight in, but hey, I want to give a different perspective on this when it comes to giving a positive look on doing this approach. In terms of my favorite levels from Halo 2, that would be levels like High Charity, where you see the Covenant and Flood fighting each other for the control of the Holy City, which I think is really cool. And then you have the level that's just called the Arbiter, which has a really cool segment where you fly around on a Banshee, and at least with regards to the music for the segment on the remaster, it's pretty damn good. My biggest issue is when the game comes to a stop and you have to duke it out with the hordes of enemies that keep coming your way until the game decides to let you go on. The one level I felt this the most was the level called the Oracle, where you go on the world's slowest elevator and then shortly after this you head into a room where you need to hold out against more enemies. Without a shred of doubt in my mind, this is one of the biggest slogs for me in the game personally. But hey, at least you get to the station and you get it to go into freefall, which is pretty neat. But yeah, that's about it really when it comes to my overall thoughts on the level design, so let's go ahead and talk about some of the game's visuals. So this is kind of the same ordeal as when I talked about the visuals in my Halo CE video, but obviously the classic visuals will once again look outdated by today's standards. They were pretty cutting edge back then, and while my nostalgia still kind of hits me here because I really don't mind viewing them in its original state, as they have their own appeal to them. However, since we are viewing the anniversary graphics, you're probably thinking, what are your thoughts on the visuals for this remaster? Well, I'll say this right now, it's basically perfect, as a lot of the new details here are made faithfully to Halo 2's original art style, which makes the game feel far more consistent with its visuals across the board, instead of it sticking out from time to time back on Halo CE, which I still think Halo CE still looks pretty dope, so please don't hate me. There's definitely a lot more detail that was put into the game when it originally released back on the original Xbox. Now I wouldn't be surprised if Bungie was really pushing the hardware to its absolute limits at the time, and it's really apparent when you compare Halo CE and Halo 2 respectively with their classic visuals. Though going back on the remaster, it actually does a really solid job at not only redefining the environments across the board really well, but also with the models too, as they look fantastic across the board. There are even moments in the campaign where 343 even put in some extra faraway details which showcase how parts of the level connect with one another, and I think it's really awesome what they did here, so major props to you guys and gals at 343. Though, if we're going to get technical here, let's address the fact that the new visuals are going to be fairly demanding on your system. So much so where you might find yourself having some pretty hefty stutters, which I hope 343 goes into and fixes these stuttering issues. Although I should note now, there was a hotfix that was released not too long ago, and from my overall experience when it came to replaying the game, I didn't notice many of the stuttering issues that I commented here, so thankfully there's that.
Also, there are some visual bugs and glitches as well with regards to what type of GPU you are using, and I'm kind of puzzled as to why they didn't go in and fix these issues, as that the players reported them with regards to their efforts when they flight tested the game even before it released. Let's put it like this: there are a host of bugs and glitches that Halo 2 released with regards to MCC's port on PC, and let's just say it doesn't end there with regards to the bugs and glitches, as we will get to when we talk about the multiplayer. However, before then, how about we go on ahead and talk about the music for Halo 2. So hey, who's ready to hear me gush more about the soundtrack to Halo again, because that's what's happening here once more. Composed again by Marty O'Donnell and Micheal Salvatori, we got a lot to love here across the entire OST. With Halo 2, we get a lot more shredding guitars, and we also get some more somber pieces thrown into the mix. And on top of that, we also get some more ambient tracks as well. Now, the redoing of Halo 2's soundtrack, which was adapted by, and I apologize if I butcher any of these names, Paul Lipson, Lenny Mori, Tom Salta, Brian Trifon, Brian Lee White, was absolutely a real treat to listen to with regards to the reorchestration of Halo 2 soundtrack. Steve Vai, who originally did the guitar segments in the original Halo 2 soundtrack, came back to re-record for Halo 2 Anniversary soundtrack, and goddamn dude, it's just so good, and I would encourage you all to listen to some of his work, as it's just flat out incredible if you haven't before. And of course, who couldn't forget that we also have Breaking Benjamin featuring a song that they created specifically just for Halo 2 called Blow Me Away, which was just awesome to see at the time, and the place it plays in the game, while it may be the instrumentals, is still an awesome song to hear regardless. Though with some of my favorites from the OST itself, well, there's a lot, but I'll limit it to just a few so that way the video isn't an hour long. So let's go down the list. For the first one we have is called In Amber Clad. Next is called Unyielding. Peril. Heavy Price Paid. And Reclaimer. And don't worry, I didn't forget the new songs that were introduced with Halo 2 Anniversary, and they're pretty awesome as well, with those being Follow in Flight, and Breaking the Covenant. Again, the music for Halo 2 is just phenomenal work done by those mentioned here, and honestly, it's just a huge aspect of the game that's highlighted here, as it really makes the experience just that much more fun to re-experience over and over again. Now, Halo CE already had multiplayer, but it was primarily limited to simply playing split screen or by hooking up consoles together for LAN matches. With Halo 2, however, this would be the first time that online would be introduced to the series, and if I'm honest, it was actually a fairly robust multiplayer component. At the time, playing online involved joining lobbies and such, but Bungie implemented a matchmaking system where you would simply pick a game type and match with others who were also looking to play that particular game type as well. This approach would inspire many other game developers to use this type of matchmaking, and still being used even today. On top of adding this revolutionary way to play online, it also had a fairly robust ranking system that would match players within your general skill range, and it worked pretty well across the board. You also had the ability to add some slight customization, such as your player emblem, or if you wanted to play as an elite instead of a human, then you could do that as well. Now, with regards to the current time, 343 would release Halo 2 Anniversary, which is part of the Master Chief Collection, and Halo 2 Anniversary is kind of its own beast across the board. Not only would this edition of Halo 2 multiplayer feeling slightly different from the original Halo 2, but it would also introduce new weapons for Halo 2 and some new maps to play on as well, which were created via through Halo 2 Anniversary's Forge editor, which we won't cover until Halo 3 hopefully. Though do note that not every map saw the remake treatment, which is kind of disappointing, but it's still a great way to play this different kind of take on Halo 2. Some of the examples with regards to what differences there are would be how some of the maps have interactive elements with how you can have an effect on the playing field. There are new weapons as well as new vehicles with regards to Halo 2's sandbox. And I'll be honest with you, there is a lot to talk about here, but if anything, I'd rather just mention some of the new additions to the sandbox, that being the silenced SMG, the assault rifle, which makes a comeback in the Anniversary Edition's multiplayer exclusively, and some examples for vehicles. We've got the Gun Goose, which is the mongoose that was introduced in Halo 3 but was given a new rendition to fire bullets, as well as the Hornet, which is certainly interesting to see here, which was also introduced in Halo 3. However, not everything here is done with much grace. Unfortunately, with regards to the port job done by 343 to bring Halo 2 Anniversary to PC, it has come with a fair amount of bugs and glitches.
The worst of these bugs being this wonky bug where you could fire into the ground, or hell, even throw grenades into the ground, and you would actually be able to kill others with this bug, friend or foe. And I should mention that with regards to this bug in particular, this was eventually patched out, thank God, but let me just say this right now, how did this even happen with regards to the game being released? Like, how did this enter the scene? Like, just what happened is really the biggest, like, statement to be made here. I should also mention that I did flight test for Halo 2, and this wasn't present during the flight, so again, something was done on 343's part to cause this issue after beta testing was all said and done. Honestly, there are just a host of issues that are present with Halo 2's release on PC, and let's just say I'm fairly concerned for whenever they decide to want to start releasing Halo 3, because if that flops, let's just say everyone's faith in 343 will vanish in a split second. So if anyone from 343 is watching this, please fix up the previous Halo games and then work on Halo 3, and make sure that it comes out as perfect as it can be, because you cannot mess this up for those wanting to experience what is essentially the biggest Halo game for many people all around. There are a number of videos that have come out recently that have documented all of the known issues, and if you've encountered anything that isn't new or hasn't been discovered before, please head over to the Halo Waypoint website and submit a ticket on the matter. And that, everyone, is my Halo 2 video. It's still an amazing game all these years later, and there are a lot of improvements that were made here when making the sequel. While there are moments where you can tell the game felt rushed out from time to time with some of the areas in the game, its positives far outweigh the negatives, and what Bungie were able to achieve here was still incredible across the board. It's still very much an easy recommendation for me to anyone who is interested in FPS games or is wanting to try out something truly iconic. Although with that said, the PC port of Halo 2 Anniversary needs some time to get ironed out with some of the bugs and glitches it has for me to truly feel confident in recommending it for those that are on PC and are interested in it. I mean, hey, for the most part, if you're looking into playing the campaign for Halo 2, you're fairly safe there for the most part. The classic Halo 2 multiplayer certainly needs some more time to be fixed up, and hey, when that happens, it'll be a great time for everyone to truly enjoy. And Halo 2 Anniversary does fare a bit better, but there are some odd quirks here and there that some may not want to put up with. Alright, I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and the next time we come back, we will take a look at Halo 3, and hopefully it's relatively bug-free when it releases on PC.